Hello, my name is Craig Hoyle of Astrology by Craig, and I'm a Year 4 student with the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship program, and this is my video presentation on the Vimshottari Dasha system in Vedic astrology. When an astrologer reads a chart, what they are really reading is the promise that the chart holds for the life experience of the person. This promise is created by the position of the planets and signs and houses from the ascendant. An astrologer reads the chart and sees the promise of their life path and what events and experiences were going to be part of their journey through life. They see the indications for the fruit of their karma or fate that lies in store for them as they walk their path in life. Once an astrologer has seen the promise of the chart and evaluated how strong or how weak or how positive or how negative those promised events will be, the next step is to predict when those karmas or fates will become a part of a person's life experience. When the karmic wave of that life event will arise and carry the person through that experience. To determine when those things will come to pass, an astrologer needs to utilize the Dasha system. And Dasha is a Sanskrit word that means circumstance or period of life. Dashas are planetary periods in which those promised events indicated by the planet in a person's chart become activated and bear the fruit of their promise. There are time periods in which that promise begins to stir and rise, generating a wave that carries the person through the period of their life, and it will be a primary focus that they will experience during that period, for good or for ill. If a planet holds a promise for positive life experiences in a person's chart, then during its dasha, it will bring about that fruit during that time period when it's being activated in the person's life. If a planet holds a promise for hardship or difficulty, it likewise will bring that fruit about during the course of its time when it is being activated in that person's life during that time period. Being able to accurately predict a fated event is the measure of a competent astrologer, which means understanding the dashas and how to use them is critical for the practice of astrology. To best understand dashas, it's important to think of time as cyclical and not linear. Almost all ancient cultures viewed time in a cyclical fashion, like cycles of the seasons. Many cultures created calendars that measured great cycles of time. The famous Mayan calendar that ended in 2012 spanned 5,125.36 years. Now in India, there is a cosmological measure of time called a kalpa, which is equal to 4.32 billion years, and according to the Vedas, it takes 36,000 kalpas to make one mahakalpa, or great kalpa. Every lifespan is a length of time, so when it comes to predicting the promise of a person's chart, it is important that we apply it to a dasha system that reflects the average lifespan of a person at that current time here on Earth. Parashara, the author of Brihat Parahara Shastra, states that Vimshottari Dasha is the most appropriate for the general population. He says the full span of a life for a human in the Kali Yuga is said to be 120 years. Therefore, amongst the various dasha systems, Vimshottari Dasha is the prime dasha. Now, what Parashara is referencing here when he says Kali Yuga is one of the 4 ages that makes up a cyclical epoch called the Yuga cycle. And the Yuga cycle is composed of an ascending and descending circular arc of time that reflects the cyclical ascending and descending evolution of mankind. Each half of the Yuga cycle is further subdivided into 4 ages, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, with Satya Yuga being the highest age of human development, intellect, and consciousness, and Kali Yuga being the lowest age. At the time that Brihat Parahara Shastra was written, mankind was in the Kali Yuga. Many astrologers today feel we are still in the Kali Yuga. But in his 1894 book, The Holy Science, the astrologer and yogi Swami Sri Yukteswar states that previous calculations for the length and duration of the yugas had become corrupted during the descent into Kali Yuga, and he puts forth in his book that we are actually currently in the year 324 Dupara of the ascending arc, which is indicated here in the illustration. Even though Swami Sri Yukteswar says that we are in Dupara Yuga, using Vimshottari is still relevant as the average lifespan of a person has not yet exceeded 120 years. Vimshottari is one of the primary dasha systems in use in Vedic astrology today. There are other systems that exist in Vedic astrology, but Vimshottari is the most well-known and most commonly used. Vimshottari is a 120-year system. Each of the 9 planets of Vedic astrology is given lordship over a dasha period. Unfortunately, the reasons for the order sequence and the duration length for each of the planets has been lost to time. But that does not mean that the system doesn't work and shouldn't be used. As I mentioned before, dashas are cycles of time. When a person is born into the world, they are essentially dropping into the perpetually flowing Vimshottari Dasha cycle, coming in at a specific point where the path of their life will ride the karmic wave of their planetary periods in such a way that it's going to give them the fruit that they are meant to experience at the appropriate time that they need to experience it. Where a person enters into the Vimshottari Dasha cycle is determined by the position of the moon in their chart. In addition to the signs of the zodiac, Vedic astrology has the nakshatra system. The nakshatras are 27 lunar mansions, or 27 divisions of the ecliptic through which the moon passes through along the course of its orbit. The 27 lunar mansions are named after the 27 wives of the moon, which are related to the fixed stars or constellations that reside in the background. Each nakshatra has a correspondence to one of the 9 planets. The nakshatra that the moon resides in at the moment that the person is born determines where that person will begin their Vimshottari Dasha cycle. A person could begin their life 14 years into their Mercury Dasha. This means that when they turn 4 years old, they will progress into their Ketu Dasha. When a planet's Dasha becomes activated, that planet becomes the Mahadasha Lord, or Great Lord of the Dasha. The agendas it has as both ruler of houses and as an indicator or karaka of things becomes the focus of that period for the person's life. The Vimshottari Dasha system is composed of 5 levels. It has 4 additional subperiods that operate concurrently with the Mahadasha period. As the Mahadasha period unfolds, the subdasha planets become activated during their subperiods as well. Just like the Mahadasha, the order of the planets is the same, but their duration becomes progressively shorter. This means that the subperiods will transition their planets quicker through their cycles. It's just like a clock where each division reflects a smaller and smaller segment of time. You can look and see a person running a Sun, Rahu, Venus, Saturn, Mars Dasha, and that means that all 5 of these planets are currently active in the person's life and are all working to bring their agendas and the things they rule into the person's life at that time. But it is the agendas of the Mahadasha that are primary. Maha means great, indicating the Mahadasha is the great or primary dasha that is running. The subdasha periods either work to help manifest, support, or work against the Mahadasha Lord. They will color the quality of the overall experience of the greater dasha period through their influence, triggering events throughout the planetary period. An important factor for knowing how a subdasha lord will influence the karmic wave of the Mahadasha is the position of the subdasha lord from the Mahadasha lord. This involves looking at the auspicious and inauspicious nature of the houses. If the subdasha lord is in a trine or angle from the Mahadasha lord, then the subdasha of that lord would be more favorable to the agendas of the Mahadasha lord, and will work more readily with it during that time period because those houses are seen as more auspicious in their nature. If the subdasha lord is in one of the inauspicious Dostana houses of the 6th, 8th, or 12th, then the subdasha of that lord will be more unfavorable to the agendas of the Mahadasha lord and will bring breaks, changes, losses, and difficulties to the person during that time period. If the subdasha lord is in one of the lesser difficult houses of the 3rd or 11th, then the subdasha of that lord will be unfavorable, but to a lesser degree than those of the primary Dostana lords. Subdashas of the 2nd lord bring added responsibilities. This can be negative as more attention and effort is needed to be directed to those things represented by the 2nd house, which can take away from the agendas of the Mahadasha lord. In addition to the position of the subdasha lord from the Mahadasha lord, what houses the subdasha lord rules from the Mahadasha lord will also give indications as to the nature of its effects. If the subdasha lord rules a difficult house from the Mahadasha lord, it could disrupt the agendas the Mahadasha lord is trying to achieve during its subdasha period. If it rules angle or trinal houses from the Mahadasha, it will bring support to the Mahadasha lord's efforts during its subperiod. The quality of that subdasha lord as either a benefic or malefic planet also plays a role in how that dasha is going to play out. Benefic planets will tend to help and make things smoother for the Mahadasha Lord, while malefic planets will tend to make a person work harder for things because malefic planets are going to seek to fulfill their own agendas during their time period, causing disruption and some degree of separation from those things that the Mahadasha Lord is trying to establish. Knowing the placement and rulership of the Subdasha Lords from the Mahadasha Lord is very important for understanding how these Subdasha periods will affect the karmic wave of the Mahadasha Lord when they become active. Another important factor for using Vimshottari is exploring the effects of the natural and temporal relationships planets have with each other. Natural relationships are permanent relationships between the planets and are based on the natural compatibility or incompatibility of their inherent qualities. Sun and Mars are naturally friendly because the self-reliant and confident nature of the Sun is compatible with the courageous and freedom-loving nature of Mars. On the other hand, the rational and curious nature of Mercury is incompatible with the instinctual and decisive nature of Mars. Temporal relationships are relationships between planets that are created at the moment that the person was born and exist only for the duration of the person's life. Parashara states that those planets that are standing in the 10th, 4th, 11th, 3rd, 2nd, and 12th from the planet in question are considered friends, while those standing elsewhere are considered enemies. When we combine the natural relationships between the planets with the temporal relationships, we get the temporary relationships between the planets. Temporary relationships tell us how planets are going to temporarily get along with each other in the chart and life of the person. If a planet is both a natural friend and a temporal friend, then that planet becomes a great friend, which means the planet will act like a great friend when it comes to helping what it is you are trying to do. If a planet is both a natural enemy and a temporal enemy, then it becomes a great enemy, which means that it will act like a great enemy when it comes to getting in the way of what it is you're trying to do. Moon is a natural friend to Mars. In this chart, Moon is in the 4th from Mars. This makes Moon a temporary great friend to Mars and makes the person's Mars-Moon period beneficial. Mercury is a natural enemy to Mars. In this chart, Mercury is in the 11th from Mars. This makes Mercury a temporary neutral to Mars, because when a planet is both a friend and enemy to a planet, it becomes overall neutral, meaning that during Mars-Mercury periods, Mercury won't get in the way of what Mars is trying to do, but it won't help it out either. Saturn is a natural neutral to Mars. Saturn is in the 8th house from Mars in this chart. Therefore, Saturn will be a temporary enemy to Mars in this chart, indicating that Mars-Saturn periods for this chart are going to be difficult as Saturn's agendas are going to get in the way and take away from the agendas of Mars. Knowing the natural and temporal relationships between planets is important for determining the beneficial or difficult subdasha periods a person will experience during their Mahadasha. We are fortunate today in that we don't have to sit down and work out these 5 levels of time manually. We have computers that can calculate these timetables for us. Ernst Wilhelm's Kala software gives you the 5 periods that make up the Dasha cycle for the person. This is the birth chart of Elvis Presley. Notice that he was born 10 years and 4 months into his Rahu Dasha. This tells us that each person has a unique Dasha cycle assigned to them at the moment of their birth. This means that some people will go through a Rahu Dasha, some people won't, and others will only experience a partial Rahu Dasha. It all depends on what is needed for the person to experience their unique karmic wave. Before we look at the Dasha that a person is currently running, we have to look at the chart to see the promise that that planet holds in the person's birth chart. For that, we have to analyze the birth chart and see the agendas that the planet has and will seek to bring into the person's life when its Dasha period activates in order to produce its karmic fruit. We also need to explore if there will be any planets that will either help to increase the manifestation of those agendas or will seek to disrupt them. We need to look at the birth chart for the following. What houses does the Dasha Lord rule? The houses a planet rules gives you an indication as to the agendas that the planet has and will seek to make the focus of the person's life experience during that period. If the Dasha Lord rules the 7th house of relationships and marriage, then that will be the focus of the person's life during that Dasha period. If it rules the 10th of career and status, then that will be a focus of their life during that period. Any planets placed in houses ruled by the Mahadasha Lord are going to be activated during the Mahadasha period, along with the houses that they rule. This means that these planets and these houses must be taken into consideration when looking at the effects of the Dasha period. What is the Dasha Lord a Karaka of? What a planet is a Karaka or significator of gives you indications as to what things will be a part of a person's life during that period. If Venus is being activated, relationships and marriage will be a part of the person's life experience at that time. If Mars is being activated, siblings and peers will be a part of a person's life. What are the agendas of the other planets that are aspecting the Dasha Lord? Knowing what a planet's agenda is in the chart gives you insights into the experience the person is going to have during the Dasha period. It will also tell you which planets will support that agenda and which planets will get in the way. Planets through their house rulership and through their natural karakaship will have agendas that will either support those of the Dasha Lord, increasing the momentum of the karmic wave that has been established, or a planet will have agendas that run counter to the Dasha Lord's agendas and will therefore slow or disrupt the momentum of the karmic wave, causing setbacks, breaks, and changes. Where is the planet located? What house and sign a planet is placed in will add another quality to the agendas of the Dasha, because the house and sign that the Dasha planet is located in will not only affect the house, but also its lord. If a planet is positioned where it is strong in Digbala, which is the directional strength the planet has, then during its Dasha, that planet will be able to direct its strength towards success in what it is trying to achieve. If it is in its place of exaltation, it will work at its optimum capacity during its Dasha. As I mentioned previously, certain houses are either naturally auspicious, inauspicious, or neutral in quality. The house a planet is in from the ascendant will tell you whether its Dasha will have an auspicious or inauspicious quality to it. A Dasha Lord placed in the 8th from the ascendant will bring breaks and changes to the person's life during its Dasha, while a Dasha Lord placed in the 9th from the ascendant will bring good fortune and a sense of purpose to their karmic path. Another important factor to this is wherever the Dasha Lord is placed, the Lord of that house, or the dispositor, will also be activated during that Dasha. This means that those things that the dispositor rules and the house that is placed in will also be activated by the planetary period of the Dasha Lord. The placement of the Dasha Lord becomes important when the sub-Dasha planetary periods become activated. When looking at the Mahadasha Lord, we should treat it like the ascendant, where everything else in the chart is being built off of that planet. Where the sub-Dasha planets are, house-wise, in relation to the placement of the Dasha Lord, indicates whether or not the sub-period Lord will be a supportive influence or disruptive influence during the Mahadasha period. What yogas is the planet a part of? Now, in a previous video, I covered planetary combinations or yogas, so if you don't know what yogas are in Vedic astrology, I recommend watching it as it will give you a nice overview of what yogas are, as well as the importance of the qualities of the houses that form them as being either auspicious or inauspicious. For the purposes of this video, I will simply say here that yogas are planetary combinations that through their uniting yoke a person with the events of a particular life experience, or a fate or karma. When you read a person's birth chart and learn the path of their life, you can look at their cycle of dashas and get an idea of the ebb and flow of their karmic wave that is moving them along their path, and it will give you insights into how to anticipate what might a person experience during their dasha period. Now let's explore the dasha periods in the life of Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley was an American singer and entertainer of the 20th century. Presley rose to fame in the late 1950s for his charismatic performances that challenged the cultural norms of the day. His impact on the landscape of popular music in America was considerable, as evidenced by the moniker the King of Rock and Roll that was bestowed on him. Presley's singing career waned in the mid-1960s as he was first drafted in the Army and then ventured into acting afterward. His popularity surged again in the late 1960s when he decided to return to music exclusively. Throughout his career, Presley struggled with substance abuse, poor management of his finances, difficult personal relationships, and the pressures of maintaining an image that had become inexorably linked to the pop culture zeitgeist of his generation. He succumbed to heart disease in 1977 at the age of 42. Presley's influence on music and pop culture is significant, and his iconic persona remains ever identified with the music and culture of the era in which he rose to fame. Elvis Presley only went through 3 dasha periods in his lifetime. He was born in a Rahu Dasha, and it lasted through the first 7 years of his life. Rahu and Ketu Dashas can be life-changing periods for a person because the lunar nodes tend to put people in vulnerable external situations with the evolutionary goal of creating greater inner security. Presley was born and grew up in poverty. The family struggled for many years as Presley's father, Vernon, moved from job to job. In 1938, Vernon was found guilty of forging a check and sentenced to 8 months in jail, resulting in the loss of their home. This forced Presley and his mother to move in with their extended family. Despite all the early upheavals, Presley had a very close relationship with his parents, in particular his mother. During his 7th year, Presley entered his Jupiter Dasha. Presley would remain in his Jupiter Dasha until he was 23 years old. This would be a formative time period, as the family moved to Memphis, which would expose the painfully shy Elvis to more opportunities for growth and development as he discovered a very rich music scene there. Jupiter is an expansive planet that is always looking optimistically for new opportunities. Presley would begin his professional music career during this time period, eventually skyrocketing to fame at the end of this dasha, taking advantage of opportunities to make records, tour, make television appearances, and pursue movie roles. At the age of 23, Presley would move into his Saturn Dasha, and he would remain in his Saturn Dasha until his death in 1977. Saturn is a planet of hard work. When Saturn is strong, it's going to make the person a hard worker and have a very strong work ethic. Saturn is also a planet of limitations and restrictions that can generate feelings of despondency, as the many things that Saturn brings into our life are hard, difficult, and require patience and endurance. At the very beginning of his Saturn Dasha in 1958, Presley was drafted into the Army and would serve overseas in Germany for 2 years. Shortly before shipping overseas, Presley's mother, Gladys, died from hepatitis. It would be a loss that Presley would never fully recover from. While in Germany, Presley would meet his future wife, Priscilla Bialy. The relationship was initially kept secret in an effort to avoid alienating Presley's female fans. In 1960, Presley left the Army and quickly returned to recording music, performing, and making television appearances. Presley also began making movies that, while commercially successful, began to take the edge off of his rock and roll persona and would eventually hurt his image as a serious musician. In 1967, Presley married Priscilla, and in 1968, their only child, Lisa Marie, was born. Presley would also stage a career comeback in 1968 by filming his first television performance since 1961. The performance, which later became known as the '68 Comeback Special, focused on stripped-down musical performances that highlighted Presley's prowess as a performer. Its overnight success proved to be a turning point in reestablishing his musical career. Presley would build on that success with a performance at the International Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. That performance would lead to a 5-year residency in Las Vegas and a very successful American tour. In 1972, Priscilla would file for divorce. As with the loss of his mother, the loss of Presley's marriage left him inconsolable. In 1973, Presley would perform a concert in Hawaii that would become the first ever concert aired globally. This performance marked the height of Presley's success as a performer. In the following years, Presley's health began to decline. He had been a habitual user of prescription medications to help him get through the long stretches of work. Combined with a poor diet, the results eventually took their toll on his health. On top of this, mismanagement of his finances during this time had left Presley essentially broke, resulting in increased pressure to maintain a rigorous recording and touring schedule to recoup these losses. Presley would die of a heart attack on August 16, 1977. Now that we have gone over the 3 main Dasha periods that shaped Presley's life, let's explore more fully the path of Presley's Saturn Dasha, to read the promise a planet holds in the chart for a person, and to look for when the promise of those events will be fulfilled. Saturn is a planet that kind of has a bad reputation surrounding it. It is known for bringing difficulty and sorrow into a person's life. This is because Saturn is all about the hard, backbreaking, and tedious work that one has to do just to get by in the world. It's the work that you have to do just to survive at life. In Roman mythology, Saturn was associated with farming. And if you really think about it, farming is really hard work because you have to till the soil, you have to plow it, You have to dig out the rocks. It's very time consuming. You also have to work with things like manure and compost, which is decomposing plant matter. You had to work all day in the hot sun, and you were exposed to the elements. And your livelihood really depended on the season and the weather, and on things that really just were beyond your control. And all you had to hope for, and all you had to really kind of show for your efforts, was whatever it is that you received at the end of the season as part of your harvest. Saturn puts trust in material realities, but it can also bring detachment from material things. The Romans believed that Saturn was the god of time. Now, in traditional Vedic astrology, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto aren't considered for astrological assessment. So this means that Saturn is the farthest planet in the celestial court. He is the slowest. He is called the lame one, who moves slowly through the heavens, making us endure long periods of time before we can see the results of our hard work that we have been called to perform. Saturn is the planet of longevity. He brings illness and decay into our lives. Saturn reminds us that we are limited beings with a finite number of healthy and active days here on Earth. Saturn brings limitations, restrictions, and boundaries to our life, all of which can instill fear, worry, and despondency in us. But through this, Saturn can make us recognize what is truly the best use of our time. Saturn helps us to focus and direct our efforts towards the things that will have a real and lasting value. Saturn is a malefic planet, and malefic planets are seen as cruel planets because they make a person work for the things that they rule and influence. In Saturn's case, that work centers around something that we are lacking in. When we find that we are lacking something in our lives, we see it as a problem. Saturn's way of dealing with it is to work really, really hard until that problem goes away, or more precisely, until the feeling of that lack around that problem goes away. Because Saturn creates a perception of lack, it generates a feeling that there isn't enough to go around. There isn't enough time or energy to put into anything else but solving the problems that Saturn is focused on. As long as those problems are in our life, Saturn only has time and energy for dealing with those problems in regards to the things that it is focused on, which are the houses and things that it rules. This makes Saturn a separating influence. He separates us from everything else that he is influencing that aren't his own during its dasha. This is why Saturn is often seen as a negative influence. He separates us from people and things in our life because he only has time and energy to look after his own things. The first thing we need to do when exploring the effects of Presley's Saturn Dasha is to read the promise of Saturn in the birth chart. So what houses does Saturn rule? Saturn rules Presley's second house of family, wealth, resources, and responsibility. Saturn also rules the third house of skills, talent, communication, desires, art, and music. During Saturn Dasha, these are the houses and areas of life that Saturn is going to direct his energies towards because he perceives there is a lack in these areas of life. He's going to work at solving problems that are creating insecurities around those things. Presley started his Saturn Dasha by being drafted into the Army. Although he was enthusiastic about serving his country, service and duty are Saturn qualities, it did derail the performance aspect of his career and created a lack around his responsibilities to his family and his desires for fame and fortune. Presley felt a responsibility to look after his parents. He employed his father as a career and finance manager, and his estate Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee, was bought to be a home for the three of them. Sun, Venus, and Mercury are placed in the second house, indicating that what they are karakas of and what houses they rule as lords must be taken into consideration. Sun rules the ninth house of purpose and marriage. It is also the natural karaka of the self. Venus rules the 6th and 11th houses. It is also the natural karaka for marriage and Presley's karaka for his spouse. Mercury rules the 7th and 10th houses. It is also the natural karaka for skills and abilities. Looking at these planets, we can see that things like the path of his purpose, marriage, and his skills and abilities are all going to be activated during Presley's Saturn Dasha. Agendas around gains, work, career, status, relationships, and marriage are going to be part of it. What is Saturn a karaka of? Saturn brings a strong work ethic, a sense of duty, concentration, patience, and endurance. Saturn is Presley's Amachakaraka, the Jaimini Karaka of ministers. And ministers are people who give counsel to the king. But on another level, the Amatya Karaka is the planet that influences the path of one's career and professional life. Its qualities shape how we walk the path of our career. Having Saturn as the Amatya Karaka indicates the qualities of hard work, endurance, and determination that are going to shape Presley's career path. It tells us that he was willing to work hard and long to make his career successful. He identified very much with working and staying busy, working at it. Presley's Saturn Dasha was a prolific time period for him. He made 29 films, recorded 38 albums, and performed 731 times in concert, arguably his busiest period in life. And where is Saturn located? Saturn resides in the third house. Now the third is one of the lesser difficult houses. It is the eighth from the eighth, so it gives the lesser effects of the eighth house of sudden and unexpected changes, indicating that there is going to be unforeseen challenges during Presley's Saturn period that will require him to put more effort and focus towards in order for his desires and ambitions to be realized successfully. He will need to work at them harder. Presley's early successes during his Jupiter Dasha came quickly and easily. People and opportunities just seemed to come to him at the exact moment when they were needed to catapult his career toward success, which is a very Jupiterian quality. Presley's career post-Army found him working harder to keep him in the spotlight. He divided his time between filming in Hollywood and recording in Memphis in an effort to realize his ambitions as both an actor and a singer. Saturn also rules the second house. When the second house is being activated, it brings added responsibilities to a person's life. During this time, when Presley was trying to reestablish his career, he married Priscilla and fathered his only child, Lisa Marie. He also built around him a core group of friends and associates that was called the Memphis Mafia. And these people became salaried employees, and he took responsibility for them financially. Because Saturn rules and is placed in the third house, travel, ambition, associates, and one's desires will be the primary focus of his Saturn Dasha. The third is also music, singing, skill, talents, and success through one's own efforts. These will be the things through which Presley will be able to generate his resources and through which he will have responsibility towards keeping during his Saturn Dasha. Saturn is in its Mula Trikona sign in the third house. Mula Trikona is a planetary dignity immediately below exaltation in its effects. Mula means root, Trikona means triangle. Mula Trikona is where the root or foundational qualities of the planet emerge from. A planet's Mula Trikona sign will always be its primary focus because within that sign lies its core essence. This means that Saturn will be able to draw from its root nature, making it strong and powerful in its expression. Unfortunately, Saturn has a low Digbala score. Digbala is the directional strength of a planet, and it tells us how capable a person is at directing the energies of that planet towards the things it has an agenda for. The more we are able to direct the energies of a planet effectively in our lives, the greater success we can have with the agendas of that planet. Saturn receives its greatest strength in Digbala in the 7th house, but Presley's Saturn is in the 3rd house. So while Presley's Saturn is confident and secure in itself due to it being in its Mula Trikona sign, it will have trouble in directing that energy towards its agendas in a way that's going to lead to successful outcomes. Mars is the only planet that is Rashi aspecting Saturn. Mars will bring the energies of the 5th house of creative self-expression and the energies of the 12th house of expenses and losses to Saturn. Mars is a great enemy to Saturn, and its influence will cause frustration and a lack of patience. The aspect of Mars to Saturn is going to amplify Presley's natural insecurities and feelings of lack that will make him feel that he is falling behind and not achieving the level of material success that his personal desires had the potential to give in terms of gains. There will be frustration and impulsivity that is going to disrupt Saturn's agendas during this subperiod of Mars. Added to this is the fact that it's all happening in the 3rd house. So we see that during Presley's Saturn Dasha, there is going to be difficulty in being able to direct his energies effectively to overcome the unexpected changes that are going to be a part of his life path during his Saturn Dasha. No matter how confident and secure Saturn is within himself, it isn't going to do much to reduce that feeling of lack around its resources, ambitions, and desires that it has during Presley's Saturn Dasha. In spite of his prolific output, Presley's appeal decreased and his career faltered during the early part of the 1960s. Now, what are the agendas of Saturn and the planets that are aspecting it. During its dasha, Saturn is going to primarily have the agendas of achieving one's desired goals through one's own efforts. For Presley, this was his musical and acting career. Building wealth and resources will be part of this, not just because Saturn rules the second, but also because the third is the second from the second. So the building of wealth and resources are a secondary agenda for Presley. When we look at the planets that are aspecting Saturn, it is important that we know beforehand what their agendas are and what their promise is for the life of the person. For that, we need to have already looked at the chart as a whole and see what the promise each planet has for the person. Once we have done that, then we can look at the dasha of the person that they are currently running and know what the subperiods are going to bring to the person during that dasha cycle. For instance, Mars is in a great enemy's dignity to Saturn. This means that Saturn-Mars periods will be disruptive for Presley. Mercury and Venus are both in great friend's dignity to Saturn. Jupiter is in a friend's dignity to Saturn. So the subdasha periods for all of these planets are going to be periods where things will manifest well for Presley. All other planets are in neutral dignity to Saturn. So now we have an idea which subperiods are going to be important ones for us to consider. Now, another important subdasha period will be Saturn-Rahu. Saturn is with Rahu, and Rahu's placement indicates an area of life where the individual lacks knowledge and experience around. So there will be confusion around the agendas of that house. This can result in wasted effort and a lack of realistic expectations around the areas of life that Rahu is influencing. The negative impact of Saturn as ruler of the second in the third can lead one into being wasteful in use of their resources, particularly around efforts towards improving one's skills, such as acting. Saturn with Rahu is going to generate a lot of emotional turmoil and insecurity around the success of one's efforts. There's going to be confusion around one's ambitions and initiative. This reinforces a lot of what we have already found out about what Saturn is bringing into Presley's life during its dasha. There's going to be difficulty around realizing one's career ambitions and desires, which will be tied to one's resources and responsibilities. The fact that Rahu is involved is further indication that Presley is going to have trouble in directing his energies effectively towards success during this dasha period. There's going to be a lot of missteps and wasted effort due to confusion and insecurity that is going to prevent those feelings of lack from being satisfied. Now let's look at the subperiod of Venus in detail to see how its agendas will influence the agendas of Saturn during its period. In Roman mythology, Venus was the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. She was associated with gardens and cultivated fields. In astrology, Venus deals with harmony, balance, and compromise. Venus represents diplomacy and seeking to avoid conflict and discord. Venus rules over the finer things of life, things of luxury and comfort, and our capacity to indulge in them. Mercury brings skills in art and music, but it is Venus that gives us an appreciation of music and art and a capacity to refine those skills and elevate them towards creating something pure and elegant. Venus also rules sensuality, sexuality, and attractiveness. It is the natural karaka for marriage in every person's chart and an indicator for the spouse in the charts of individuals who are attracted to women. Venus is the planet that governs our innate sense of pleasure and satisfaction with who we are and what we're trying to achieve. It is our self-esteem and our self-respect that we express as a fulfillment of our capacity to love ourselves completely, warts and all. Venus helps us to make balanced and right decisions that lead us to higher fulfillment. It negotiates who we are in the world with the path that we're on, making changes and adjustments that lead us to greater contentment. Venus is a benefic planet that will be gentle in its effects. It is a soothing planet that can soften the hard edges of malefic planets. Venus makes the path of our life smoother and helps us to set our sights on getting to more desirable places in our life. Because it is soothing and comforting in nature, the harsher aspects of getting to those desirable places becomes more bearable with Venus. Now, when looking at the subperiod Lord, we're going to look at it in pretty much the same way that we do the Mahadasha Lord. So we're going to look at Venus in the same way that we just looked at Saturn. Where is Venus located? Venus is in the second house, which is the 12th from Saturn. This indicates that there will be things in Presley's life during this subperiod that will require more responsibility from him, and there will be things that he will be asked to let go of because the cost of keeping them is just too high. Venus brings things like wife, marriage, music, art, and luxury to the second house of material well-being, self-worth, and family. During his Saturn-Venus period, Presley will have added responsibilities and expenses around his romantic relationships and his desires that are going to lead him to let go of some things that are part of his immediate environment in order to gain the higher fulfillment of Saturn's goals. Sun and Mercury are placed with Venus in the second house. Sun is a great enemy to Venus, while Mercury is a neutral. This means that during his Saturn-Venus-Sun period, Sun is going to agitate Venus, causing Presley to sacrifice the fulfilling aspects of his life and his relationships in a way that's going to generate anger and come off as being self-righteous in its expression. What houses does Venus rule? Venus rules the 6th and 11th houses, which are the 4th and 9th houses from Saturn's placement. The 6th indicates that there will be setbacks to Saturn's agendas for overcoming the lack in regards to one's resources and for achieving one's desired goals during this time period. This is reinforced by the involvement of the 11th house, which is the 6th house from the 6th, or a lesser 6th house in its effects. Together they are going to create situations where debts, setbacks, and one's day-to-day work environment are going to interrupt the path of seeking to increase one's resources and the goals of one's personal desires that they're striving to achieve during this period. The 4th house indicates that agendas of seeking greater emotional security and happiness are going to impact Saturn's agendas. As ruler of the 9th house from Saturn, Venus indicates that marriage will be one of the things that will come into Presley's life that will impact the agendas of Saturn. And Venus is going to impact Saturn's ambitions for reducing these feelings of lack around resources, responsibilities, and for working to achieve one's desired goals by giving it a positive focus on finding greater fulfillment to one's self-esteem through the accomplishment of things like marriage and emotional security. Venus is going to help Saturn appreciate its hard work, which in turn will help Saturn to feel a greater sense of accomplishment and validation that comes through the enjoyment of what one has worked for. What is Venus a karaka of? Well, Venus is our capacity to make well-rounded decisions. It is our innate pride that helps us make changes in our lives that lead to higher fulfillment. Venus is also the natural karaka for marriage in every chart. Venus seeks to find fulfillment and expression through love, which lends itself to things like romantic partnerships and marriage. Venus is also Presley's Atmakaraka, and the Atmakaraka is the Jaimini Karaka of the self. Atma means soul, and Karaka means root. So the Atmakaraka is the root soul of the person. So the Atmakaraka gives indications for the karmic development of the root soul of a person. This means that the periods involving Venus will be periods that relate to the root soul of Presley's karmic experience around relationships and developing harmony and balance around them. What are the agendas of Venus? Now, Venus is not a manifesting planet. It is a soothing influence that helps bring comfort. The great friends relationship that Venus has with Saturn indicates that during this Saturn-Venus period, Presley is going to focus less on the things that he is lacking in and more on things that are validating in regards to his self-esteem and self-respect. There will be greater acceptance of one's strengths and weaknesses in a balanced way that is going to smooth things out, leading Presley to make more balanced decisions around the efforts to achieve Saturn's agendas. As ruler of the 6th house, Venus is going to have agendas for integrating one's work environment and daily routine in a balanced and healthy way. There will be a focus on finding harmony with one's working relationships and everyday work environment. As ruler of the 11th, Venus is going to have agendas for seeking security through social relationships and for making the best decisions that will help them move closer to achieving the goals of Saturn's agendas. Because Venus rules the 4th from Saturn, its sub-dasha period is going to place a focus on one's home environment and achieving greater emotional security. When Venus is influencing Saturn positively, it will bring greater focus on relationships in general, but particularly in regards to one's spouse or partner. This is because we often find self-love and validation through our partners. Venus rules the 9th from Saturn, So its subperiod is going to bring a focus on marriage as a way for soothing the feelings of lack that is coming from Saturn. The ninth is going to bring a moral aspiration to Saturn's agenda that it will seek to fulfill out of a sense of duty or purpose in order to feel that greater security and realize the goals of its desires. So during Presley's Saturn-Venus period, Saturn's primary agenda of working hard to achieve one's personal desires and for increasing one's financial security is going to be colored by Venusian things of finding greater emotional security and validation through romantic partnerships and marriage. Saturn's focus will be directed towards finding greater harmony and balance with one's home and daily life, which is going to help in overcoming the perception of lack Saturn has, because Venus is in a great friends relationship with Saturn. So the agendas of Venus will support and validate the things that Saturn is working to achieve through its dasha. Presley met his future wife, Priscilla, while he was stationed in Germany in the army. The relationship was initially kept secret out of fear that it would damage Presley's popularity amongst his female fans. When Presley left Germany in 1960, their relationship became long distance. Priscilla eventually moved to Memphis in 1963, staying at Graceland while Presley traveled to and from Hollywood to film movies. By 1966, this arrangement had put a strain on the relationship, as rumors of Presley having romantic liaisons with female co-stars began to circulate in the press. Colonel Tom Parker, Presley's manager, finally stepped in and reminded Presley that, as an entertainer, he had both a contractual and moral obligation to be a positive role model to his fans. In the social conventions of 1960s America, living with one's romantic partner outside of marriage was a pretty taboo thing. Shortly after Parker's intervention, Presley proposed to Priscilla. They would be married on May 1st, 1967. Now, it is important to note that while Presley's Saturn-Venus period held a promise for marriage in his life, it didn't hold a promise that there was going to be a success with this marriage. Now let's go over the role of Vargas when it comes to looking at the Dashas. For those of you who don't know, Vargas or divisional charts are subdivisions of the degree space of the 12 signs of the zodiac that an astrologer can create charts from that helps to give them further insights into specific areas of a person's life. I have made a previous video that covers the divisional charts in Vedic astrology that you can look up if you want to know more about them. Vargas add another layer to looking at the dasha that the person is going through. Looking at the dasha lord in the relevant Vargas reveals just how a person feels about that area of life that is unfolding around them. For instance, the Hora or second divisional chart is related to our wealth and our finances. A person can have a wonderful birth chart in regards to their finances, but have a completely trashed Hora that makes them feel very unsatisfied with the wealth that they do have. Now there are 16 divisional charts shown here on the left. But Kala has a nice table in it called the Dignities in the Varga table that shows you the dignity of each planet in each Varga. The more that you see that a Dasha Lord is in good placement within the Vargas, the more harmonious that Dasha period will be for the person. This is a handy tool at your disposal that you can look at right away and see if the Dasha is going to be smooth or rocky overall for the individual. The Navamsa or ninth divisional chart is a particularly important Varga to look at in regards to Dashas. Looking at the Navamsa to see how well a Dasha Lord is doing is a necessity for judging just how the person is going to react and respond to the fruit that that Dasha Lord is bringing into their life, which in turn is going to influence how they respond and react to the karmic wave that is unfolding in front of them. The Navamsa deals with one's life purpose. We look at the Navamsa to see how a person feels about their life purpose in the context of what the planet is producing for them during that Dasha period. Saturn rules the 7th and 8th houses in the D9 and is placed in Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus, who is a great friend to Saturn in Presley's birth chart. This tells us that Presley is going to feel confident in his capacity for relationships and be able to handle the sudden breaks and changes that come his way along the path. He is going to feel that through hard work and perseverance, he will be able to reach the goals of his ambitions for his path in life and his marriage. Moon and Mercury will support Saturn through their Rashi aspect. Mercury is going to help by giving a capacity for Presley to relate to his partners, and Moon is going to help by giving a capacity for nurturing and adaptability in one's role as a partner. Now, Venus is the most important planet you want to look at in the Navamsa because it is the natural karaka for marriage. Unfortunately, Venus in Presley's Navamsa is in its sign of debilitation. This tells us that Presley doesn't have any capacity to make the best decisions for a healthy marriage because he lacks the ability to take his partner's needs into consideration. Saturn is also suffering from a Rashi aspect from Rahu. Rahu is going to bring confusion, doubt, and secrets. Because Rahu's lord, Venus, is debilitated, the malefic and separative qualities of Rahu are going to be predominant. So there's going to be trust issues, doubts, misunderstandings, and confusion that is going to disrupt the path of Presley's marriage. Now, Sun is in Gemini in the D9, placing it in an enemy's dignity. And this means that Presley's going to have difficulty in consistently managing his marital life. Jupiter's aspect from its own sign of Sagittarius will help by giving him a belief system that is going to frame things in the context of a bigger picture in regards to his life path. But due to the Rashi aspect of debilitated Venus to both Sun and Jupiter, the agendas of both are going to get hurt through things like mistresses and a lack of fairness and devotion. Priscilla and Elvis's relationship suffered from mutual infidelities. The Navamsa reveals that while Elvis had a great capacity to persevere, communicate, and fulfill his role in the marriage, of taking his partner's needs into consideration, and also for making the best decisions towards building a harmonious marriage. Despite having a strong capacity for marriage, doubt, mistrust, and a lack of devotion and consistency to the path of his marriage will eventually destroy it. Presley legally separated from Priscilla in July of 1972. Their divorce was finalized in October of 1973. Both events occurring during Presley's Saturn-Rahu period. Now let's explore one of the yogas that Saturn is forming in Presley's chart and get an understanding of how that yoga is going to bear its karmic fruit during Presley's Saturn Dasha. Saturn is forming an Anafa yoga in Presley's chart. Now, an Anafa yoga is formed when a planet, other than Sun, Rahu, or Ketu, resides in the 12th house from the moon. This yoga reveals the conditioning and demeanor through which the individual is going to meet their life experiences. Parashara outlines the positive results of this yoga by saying that one born with it will be a king and a man of influence and authority. He's going to be well-dressed, virtuous, famous, strong, and magnanimous, charming, good-natured, healthy, blessed with marital comfort, and happy. One is calm in disposition, enjoying pleasures of the senses and peace of mind. One will have political wisdom and moral training, and know many sastras. He's going to be steadfast, honored, and have enormous wealth. He will possess a beautiful body and be capable of attracting the fairer sex. Saturn is going to color the effects of this yoga by conditioning the individual's consciousness through hardship, fear, limitation, and restraint to help strengthen and discipline the person towards being something greater, reflected in the positive results of this yoga of making this person famous and like a king. Now, the second house is one's early childhood experiences, and the third is developing our skills and talents through trial and error. Presley came from a very poor family. His poverty and his love of what he termed hillbilly music alienated him from his peers and made him a target of bullying while growing up. Yet Presley persevered in developing his personal desires to sing and play music, which strengthened his self-worth. Now, the presence of Rahu with Saturn is going to lessen the positive impact of this yoga, and it's going to bring some difficulties to it. Rahu leaves a murky haze to the sign it previously occupied, which in Presley's case is the sign of Pisces, where the moon resides. This murky haze will distort the general qualities and effects that the moon brings to Pisces, creating an overall haze to one's emotional nature that will cause detachment, eventually leading the person to more spiritual pursuits as a source of one's happiness. Now, an interesting thing about this is Moon is Presley's Dara Karaka, which is the Jaimini Karaka of one's spouse. Now, it was during this time period that Presley stopped making films and returned to his first love of music. Presley poured his energies into reestablishing his personal desires of being a performing artist and musician. Now, Saturn brings detachment from the material and sensual life, and as a lunar node, Rahu brings an eclipsing energy that obscures our perception of things. Because Rahu is bringing that murky haze to the moon, Presley will feel detached from his spouse, which is ultimately going to lead to the marriage being dissolved during his Saturn-Rahu period. So while this yoga has great potential for making Presley a king and making him famous, which are all things that did happen, it will come at the expense of his personal relationships. The realization of the karmic effects of this yoga is going to also bring about the loss of Presley's marriage during his Saturn Dasha. Saturn's agenda during its Dasha period was to achieve the ambitions of Presley's personal desires. The accomplishment of those desires initially entailed developing skills around his acting career and then later applying his talents as a performer towards reestablishing his singing career. Both of these efforts were fueled by a need to generate increased financial security. Presley's Saturn worked hard to achieve this. His Saturn Dasha was his most prolific time period as an entertainer. As I mentioned previously, he made 29 films, recorded 38 albums, and performed 731 times in concert during his Saturn Dasha. It is estimated that he made anywhere between $100 million and $1 billion over the span of his career. Saturn was the lord of Mercury, the seventh of partners, Sun, the ninth lord of marriage, and Venus, the natural karaka for marriage, and also the spouse. Venus ruled the ninth from Saturn, adding to the karmic wave of Presley's Saturn-Venus Dasha as a potential period for marriage as a part of Saturn's quest for greater security and self-worth. Saturn is strongest in Digbala in the seventh house, the house where our desires find fulfillment through long-term committed relationships with others. Presley's Saturn was elevated due to its Mula Trikona dignity, giving him a high capacity to tap the core energies of Saturn, which is determination, perseverance, and a strong work ethic. But because Saturn's Digbala score was low, it prevented Presley from directing those energies in a way that would bring about any lasting success with those agendas during its Dasha. Towards the end of his life, Presley had little financial security due to the mismanagement of his wealth, and years of drug use and a poor diet took its toll on his health and reduced his stage presence to a shadow of its former glory. Presley's relationship and marriage would ultimately suffer as the influence of Venus's subperiod would recede and give way ultimately to Presley's Saturn-Rahu period, when the karmic wave of his marriage to Priscilla ended. But it is the impact of Rahu that seals the fate of this period. Rahu is being activated throughout the entirety of Presley's Saturn Dasha. Its influence to Saturn as the ruler of the second in the third led to confusion and a wasteful use of his skills, talents, and resources. Ultimately, Saturn was unsuccessful in achieving its agendas because Presley simply wasn't able to direct his Saturn effectively to achieve those results in a long-term lasting way. On top of that, Rahu's influence generated a lot of confusion, insecurity, and turmoil that led to a lot of painful separation. It prevented Saturn from focusing long-term on the things that could have brought him security and happiness over time. The Vimshottari Dasha system is one of the most important Dasha systems in Vedic astrology for predicting the planetary periods a person is going to experience over the course of their life. It is a great tool for seeing the karmic wave that is going to shape a person's life experience as the promise of their chart reveals itself over time. This concludes my presentation on the Vimshottari Dasha system in Vedic astrology. I hope it encourages you to explore more deeply the many facets of Vedic astrology. Thank you for watching. To read my full chart assessment of Elvis Presley, please go to my website. To schedule an appointment for an astrological reading, you can feel free to reach out to me through my email address at craig@astrologybycraig.com. Thank you once again, and have a great day.